I will just tell you a little bit about the context um, of this project that brought us together. It's a project that started with the Occupy Library Conference, continued with a series of online events that helped us go through the pandemic. I would say in a more positive manner that if we weren't lucky enough to have such wonderful partners. Our aim with this project was to build a healthy foundation for future innovators hub in the Black Sea region, because throughout our careers, both me and my colleague Claudia Șerbanuță from Progress Foundation, we've heard so many wonderful stories coming from libraries and from libraries working with NGOs especially in the areas where we come from Romania. We have been working with Ukraine and with Moldova, and we just want to encourage this way of helping each other as organizations that work deep in the communities, doing grassroots development most of the times. We really believe that libraries and NGOs, CSOs should become more and more friends and learn how to work together and learn how to put their resources together so that their communities develop and their communities grow and change the world for the better. So, and now I give you my two impact ladies. So you go. The floor is yours. Don't forget that you can always interact with us by writing in the chat, and we will have there will be the time when you can actually open your microphone and your camera and make your voice heard like live. Yes. So thank you for being with us, and I'm out.
Thank you, Anka. So let us arrange the screens so that we can go. So my name is Christine, and as I'm very pleased about all the good words, Anka, that you mentioned. But we really are honored to talk today to all the very experienced librarians and storytellers about this very for us, interesting topic, and it seems that it really is interesting seeing how many people are joining us today. So libraries are great, and prove it. So that's something that we prepared to talk about today, about how to use data in storytelling, how to tell more powerful stories, and that's our topic for today. So we will have three parts of this workshop. At first, we will tell a little bit about storytelling in general. I will give you some tips and guidance and some structure on how to go about it. And then we will spend a little bit of time to talk specifically about how to go about using data in stories and making them more powerful for our listeners. And at the end of the workshop today, we also will take a look into some examples of stories that we prepared for you, and we'll analyze together to see how we are doing and what we can do better. So let's move on, and I'll hand on to Ugne.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Anka. I just want to say the same. Pleasure to be here. It's early morning in Chile, but I'm really glad to be able to speak with all of you. And we'll start by icebreaker. In most of your countries, I know that there are people from all parts of the world, but in most of your countries, it's a winter time now. So this is one reason why we have to do an icebreaker to break ice, literally. But also I think that most of us are Eastern Europeans, and sometimes we are a little bit reserved and a little bit shy. So we also need to know each other better before we can work together. So I have a very simple question for you today. And please use chat to respond to this question. So I just want to ask you, what did you have for breakfast today? And as you are thinking and hopefully typing it in the chat, Christine, what did you have for breakfast?
Well, this morning, as all my mornings, I had oatmeal porridge. So I'm very Latvian. That's something that every child would get in the morning, a powerful meal to survive until lunch at least. And I love it. It's very simple,
like
no
it.
additions this time, but you can add berries or some sweets if you want to make it sweeter. It makes me going. And what did you had?
Coffee. Coffee, it's an early morning for me, and I can see that that some of our participants joins me. So Anka had coffee as well. We have someone who also had oatmeal with blueberries and honey. Yaroslava, she had eggs, tea and apple, toast, olives, and tea. Lovely. Wow, banana and peanut butter, yogurt and coffee, yogurt, coffee, omelette, strong coffee. It seems like everyone is having a lot of coffee. That's a main pattern so far for all the participants. And we also have quite a few oatmeal lovers, so it's really nice. Any other responses? Sandwich, juice, coffee. Yeah, everyone is with coffee. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much for your responses. I hope it cheered you up a little bit and also connected you a little bit with us. And I think we can start, Christine.
Yes, let's do it. So it was a nice exercise, but it was also our test of how actively you're using the chat. Is because during the event, at the end of every topic, we'll stop for questions. And you can type your questions in the chat wherever you have them, and we will be monitoring them and we'll pick up those questions at a certain time. So don't be shy and really tell us that you are there. So I will be talking first, as I said, about the storytelling. So I really like this image that you can see is because storytelling is both about telling and listening. It's just that not always the message which we are giving receives the listener in the same way, let's say. So today, let's talk just a little bit about some tips, how we can decrease that bubble in the middle to make it more clear and more direct for those who are telling this. So now I would want to show you something that I found very useful for myself. And that is an infographic that I found online couple of, let's say from 5 years ago already. But it's still relevant, and it is from a visual storytelling workshop that has been held in Vancouver in Canada. Was not a workshop for librarians, was for other people, but also dealing with challenges in storytelling. And I think that this visual summarizes it all beautifully. It talks about why stories matter, and it includes things of why we are afraid of telling stories, what are the challenges that we have. It includes some of the tips of what a good story, what are the elements of a good story, and also some writing tips of, let's say, how to make people feel or how to build the support and so on. So many of you, and I've heard this a lot while working at IFLA with the library map, that many people are telling me that telling stories is hard. And but it doesn't have to be like that. You may feel sometimes not very confident about yourself as a writer or as a storyteller. But the thing to keep in mind is that you have lived all the experience and you know what you are talking about. We all are social beings and we tell stories every day to each other. So, but some things are something that we have to keep in mind when we prepare for better storytelling. So, and in the rest of the presentation, I will focus just on some like basic questions to ask ourselves while we are preparing to tell those stories. So the first thing I want to focus on is the audience. And it was also in the visual before that you saw that what is the audience that you are actually telling the story to, and how to adapt to my audience. It depends. You can tell the same story in different ways, and it will depend on who you are telling it to. Is it your fellow librarian you're telling it, or is it your stakeholder you are talking to, a decision maker, someone who knows a lot about what you do, someone who you talk the first time? Are you telling the story face to face, or is this something that you write down and other people will read without your being by your side? Or is it a virtual story that can come together also with visual elements? So your audience will matter. One advice that I want to give you is whenever you speak to external audiences, someone who is not a librarian, do not use library jargon. Do not use concepts that we as librarians, we know very well, but when we mention something to someone who is not related to library world, they may not know what that concept involves, and you are just losing a lot of information because of that. That's a simple advice, and something to think about when you think about to who you are telling this story to. That would be the first question that will determine how the story will be developed. So the next is, how much time do they have? And one thing is really, as we all know in these days, there's a lot of information all around, and we ourselves, we want to learn things fast, quickly, and when we need them. And if you have 2 minutes, you have 2 minutes. If you have half an hour, you have half an hour. So the advice is to first respect the time of your listener and try to fit it. But how to be prepared for this is that sometimes you will go to some event where you have dedicated time of 20 minutes to talk about something. So you'll prepare. But sometimes unexpectedly, an opportunity can come that you meet your, let's say, a municipality leader or someone important just on street or in elevator, and that might be your opportunity to also tell something. So what I want to say and advise is to be prepared, know your facts and data, and keep them in hand, and be prepared to tell the same story in a minute. So that is something about the time. So the next to consider is, how much does your audience know? Is this someone who knows very well what your library is doing and being informed on an ongoing basis? So there is no need to repeat the basics. But if you are talking to someone who doesn't really know a lot about what libraries are doing, or might have some old stereotypes of what libraries have done many years ago is different from what libraries are doing right now. So you might want to consider including some important basic information as well. So what does it mean in reality is that it'd be good to do some investigation in advance, to just learn a little bit about your audience, to learn about how informed they are and how much they really know about the issue. You might start to talk about very complex things, but a person can just not understand that information because they missed the basics. So how much do they know is something else to consider. I like this one. And this is, how much do they care? And like myself, and I know many people, we sometimes have, as library advocates, we have that feeling that, you know, I have a feeling that no one listens, you know, but what is happening is that actually they don't care. And here is something that I've learned from the social research, and well, psychologists and social researchers are studying like people's behavior for years. And what they have found is that we as people, as human beings, we are very good at avoiding information, just blocking it and not caring and not listening because of three reasons. So the first reason is that people avoid information because they feel bad about it. I might not want to hear information that makes me sad or makes me fearful, can make me feel guilty that I didn't do something. So that's one reason. Another reason is that people don't avoid listening is because they don't want to do something that you ask them to do. Okay. And the third thing is that we are avoiding information if it threatens our values, our identity, and our worldview. Okay, but for us as library advocates, where usually we tell, well, in many cases, we tell stories to change stereotypes, which is strongly connected with the world, changing the worldviews. We just close up. We sometimes don't want to listen. That's why, that is one of the reasons why it's so hard to change stereotypes. But what we can do about it? So when it comes to storytelling, I would recommend that we use a language that is optimistic, that makes people feel positive about it, that drives us, that invokes emotions and drives an action. So that if I know that someone asked me to do something that will make myself feel better that I did something for that cause, the chance that I will do something is greater. So that is something that can drive an engagement and engagement to a common cause. And we will care much more, and we will hear much more if we can um, engage with the topic. So how much do they care? So, and that's something that you will feel when you talk with someone about your library. So, and last but not least is what are their goals? So if you are, when you are telling a story, you most probably have some call of action in mind. You want something, you want to achieve, you want support from your municipality, for example. You want extra funding for your activity, and you have your own goal in mind. So what happens is that you will be more successful if you knew what the goal of your stakeholder is. And if you can align your story to that goal so that the person can relate to it and understand how this program is not only helping you and your library users and your community, but how is it helping from their perspective, how it's helping achieving their goals. So that's why before you, and especially if you are telling a story with the goal of getting extra support, extra funding, extra resources, so it'd be good to investigate what the goals of your stakeholder are, and tell the story by using keywords of those goals. And then you might be more successful for that. And that is the last one. Who do they listen to? So it might be that is, well, the first thing is, I already mentioned it in the beginning, but well, storytelling is for change. Okay, we are telling stories to achieve certain change, to have certain impact. And human stories really can have that power of creating that change. But creating that change is not only about talking, it is also about listening. And you want to make sure that someone who you are talking to is actually listening to you. Here, what happens sometimes is that that persons have preferences to who they listen more and to who they listen less. So it would be good to also explore if your stakeholder maybe might listen more to someone else who is not you. And what it means for storytelling is that it's not only you who needs to know that story, but all your staff members in the library needs to know the same story. What is even more powerful, if you involve your library users and your communities in telling your stories, it means that you have to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And the voices from the community might sometimes work better than those coming out from the library. And not only considering people, but also consider publishing your stories in sources which are read by your stakeholders and which they trust to. So many different ways, but just something to think about is that it might not always be exactly you who needs to tell that story. That is it. These were a couple of tips. I hope something useful was among those tips. And now I'd like to, I'm just checking time, so we're still fine, to focus a little bit about the specifics of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDG stories. So my daily work at IFLA is heavily related to work on the library map of the world. And here is one thing that we do: we tell stories, but we tell very specific stories, and we call them SDG stories. So what's the difference here? So if you look back to the structure that I gave to you, so the audience for these SDG stories are not other librarians. When we are telling SDG related stories, we are not telling it to other, of course we are telling it, but the main audience are not librarians. The main audience here are the stakeholders, the policy makers, decision makers who deal with sustainable development goals. So we have one goal to highlight what libraries are doing to contribute to those sustainable development goals. So it means that we have to use the language of what this audience is using to talk about the sustainable development goals. So we know what their goals are, okay? Because we have the 17 SDG goals, but the thing is that knowing those goals is to knowing what the SDGs are about. And the SDG framework has not only 17 goals, but they have 169 targets. And at that target level, so they explain what the goals are, okay? And beyond that comes indicators, metrics with which they measure how we are achieving those goals. And there are more than 200 indicators. So with this, I want to say that it's a complex system, but at IFLA, and I know that many librarians have spent time to really understand what the goals are. And here I just want to mention one of IFLA's resources for those of you who are not so familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals or how libraries are relevant. So we have an infographic which you can download from IFLA's website. It's called Information for Development and Why Access Matters Across the SDGs. And what we did, and what you will find in this infographic, is that we bolded at the target level those areas where libraries contribute and how they are relevant. For example, by providing access to different types of information, by providing access to skills and knowledge by empowering, by providing access to information technologies and many others. So when you look at it, you'll have a better idea of what is this relevance that we are talking about. And to see how other librarians have done some of the SDGs related storytelling, I invite you to connect to the library map of the world. In the stories section, we currently have more than 40 stories from 25 different countries around the world. As you see on the screen, one story can be relevant to several SDGs. And you'll see how this language from those SDGs is used in those stories, and how different types of evidence and facts are used also to support the argument of how libraries are contributing. And before I finish the first part, I also want to mention another resource, which is available also to download. Is a storytelling manual. It's not a long document, it's about 30 pages, but there are about 5 pages of important information that I encourage you to look at. A chapter on how to tell a story, which is developed for the needs of SDG storytelling, but in general, the advice and tips included in that chapter, it applies for general storytelling, no matter if it's related to SDGs or not. And some of it we will also cover in the second part of the presentation. So now is a good time to take some questions. Ugne, maybe you can help me see if we have any questions.
I think for now we don't have any questions, but I encourage everyone to ask, to use this opportunity to talk to Christine. Not every day you have a chance to talk to IFLA directly and get this kind of information, so really use this opportunity. And while you think about your questions, I just want to reflect on what Christine said. Christine, I loved your recommendation to use positive message. And in my experience, that's very powerful tool, being positive, because as you said, politicians also don't want to see people who are there to blame them. We have lots to complain to our politicians, but if you start by saying like, my library did not receive funding in your budget, or you did not complete the promise that you made before the elections. So it won't be a good way to start your conversation. And obviously, politician probably the only thing that he or she will want to do is to escape from this meeting. And it comes even not only in words, but also in body language. And I think it's also, again, something that we naturally have, is that we are nervous before meeting these people, and we sometimes come in with the head like that, looking to the floor and a little bit bended. So we show that we are not confident, and we show that we are vulnerable, that we are nervous. So that comes with practice, and I really encourage you to practice a little bit, to have your head high, to have a big smile, to give your hand flat, so really be more brave, because you are the one who has a content. You are the one who has something to say. And my tip along this positive message is always to say, look how much did we do, and with your help we can achieve so much more. So turning around your message. And I also have one question to Christine. Christine, in your experience, what is the most difficult audience to deal with, and what would be your tips to deal with that audience?
For me, I think the most difficult are those who have very strong stereotypes. And the reason for that is something that I mentioned, because it takes to change our own stereotypes. If you just observe yourself, will tell you a lot about the process and the challenge in front of you. So I think that is something that is challenging, because it takes a lot of time. It is an ongoing storytelling and communication, and yeah, and finding the right arguments which are not making other person feel bad about it. Yeah, I think, yeah, stereotypes is the most difficult. And one thing that is that really works is sometimes invite that person to the library and show, is not to tell, but to show and to demonstrate what is it. So yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Let me see.
Colleagues?
We have a question. Is it normal to feel a little bit funny when you do this the first time? I think it's very normal. And actually a little bit of humor in all of this would actually help. And yeah, I don't know, Ugne, what do you think?
Just
yeah,
one...
we have Svetlana, so let's give her a word and then I will comment on that.
It's not a question, it's just I want to say thank you. It's useful, and we received good information for you, so thank you for this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for feedback. Christine, I wanted to share just one example from my life as librarian and as someone who was running different library projects. So I want to share my experience about first time ever going on live radio show. And I really felt so nervous because I also knew that was not my first time on radio, but it was first time I was live. So I know that if I don't say something correctly, it will automatically appear live and people will still hear it. So I was really, really nervous. And as I was waiting in the studio, in the radio for the program to start, before me was the minister. I don't remember what ministry it was, maybe a Ministry of Transport. And it wasn't a politician who probably has 30 years of experience and in the position of minister. And I just realized how nervous he also was before this program. And then I realized if someone who has been in this position for so many years feels nervous before entering the studio, then it's absolutely normal what I feel with much less experiences and with no such power, you know. So I really think that we should accept that we feel nervous and probably it will never go away. This is how Christine and I feel today. It's, I think, someone related to us as humans. We can see, we have another question. Elena says, what strategy could be chosen if speaker's plan is going to be changed by the audience during the presentation? Thank you.
Well, this is a very good question. Is because you can take different approaches. Okay, you can go with what's your message and just deliver it. Okay, but the audience will accept the message more if you really can adjust to what they expect and what they ask. And sometimes it's better to stop what you prepared and just concentrate on what the questions are in the audience, because they are asking questions about issues that are important for them. And I can imagine how this situation can be possible when you didn't do enough investigation about your audience, and the audience expects something else from what you actually delivered. So, and I would say that do not be afraid of also the situations when you cannot provide an answer directly, like at that time. So you can as well say how important the question is, and and try to follow up and prepare well for the answer. So that be kind of my suggestion to, yeah, try to be adaptive and flexible. And I know that it's not very easy to do because it's all, again, is a change. And especially if you are already stressed before your presentation and an activity, that adapting to that change might be an extra pressure. And I saw
Christine,
that
do you think we should move forward and see if we are getting more questions? So really don't, it's really informal webinar. So if something comes to your mind, just post it, and at some point we will stop again and we can give more floor to the questions. But as our time is running out, probably we will move to the second part. And let me just share my presentation, my part of presentation. So you should be seeing it in the screen now. So I would like to talk a little bit about data. You know, Christine gave you lots of very, very useful information, how to prepare for the story, how to think about your audience, how to think about how to package your story. But there is one element that we also want to include into this workshop, which is data. You know, especially when you think about audience, external audience, which is not so familiar with libraries and can be more skeptic towards what libraries can deliver, what is the impact that libraries are making, and what is the value of libraries in the society, they may need data, actual data, to believe in your story. So it's really important element, and we would like to dedicate the second part of the workshop specifically for this topic. So the ones who know me knows that I really like cooking. So I borrowed this cooking terminology here, and I will try to give you some ingredients, and I will try to give you some recipes of how you could cook your story so that it's really delicious at the end. So you heard from Christine about preparation and about the overall picture. Now let's go to the story itself and try to deconstruct it a little bit. And as also Christine mentioned, not all of us are very good storytellers naturally. So there are some structures and there are some questions that can guide you and help you to come up with a really good, structured and convincing story. So the first question that each story should answer is the question why. It's a very simple question, but it's quite interesting that some people miss this piece and don't really explain. So why library started a certain activity, a program, or a project. And this is a piece of a story which would be as an introduction and would put a context to your activity or program or project. And this piece should speak about the problem or a challenge that your library is addressing. And this piece of your story has also to give a quite good picture of how your community looks like. So, you know, one of the worst stories, I must confess, are the ones who start with a long history of library, saying that library has been established in 17th century and then it was a long history of what external audiences want to hear is about people that are around the library mainly, and about their lives and about their challenges and how library is contributing to solving these challenges. And definitely this piece of a story also needs to have some data that reflects your community, and I will talk in more details a little bit later. Next question that we have to answer is what? I think this is the easiest question, and usually in every story that comes to my email or in any other way, I can find a response what library did. So it's just a description of library activity, project or program. But what is sometimes missing is again this data piece. You can tell nicely what activities you've performed, but we need to provide the audience with some evidence. So mentioning some numbers that reflect your activity of your program. And the last one is maybe the most complicated one. And sometimes libraries completely forget this question, but usually if they forget this question, then journalists or politicians give this question back to them. So they say, okay, you did this wonderful activity, and so what? And what they mean with this question is actually, what was the impact in your community? What was the impact of your program, of your project, of your service in the community that you are serving? And again, this piece of your story also needs to have some data that backs up and makes the story more credible. So let's look at each of the components separately. The question why, which needs to be backed up with data about your community. What we want to tell them. First of all, mention something about the community. Demographic situation, socioeconomic situation. For example, it's a big difference whether your library operates in a rich, well-off community or in a poor, vulnerable area, faced with a lot of social and economic problems. Also to mention demographics. Are these mainly young people that you are serving, or are we talking about children? Or is it a typical situation where you have a lot of elderly people and you are mainly looking for ways to serve them? You may need to mention geography and infrastructure that is available. For example, is it a rural community or is it an urban big city community? That's very important because it gives a context, it gives us understanding where your library operates and what are some of the challenges that this library may face and address through the programs. What is community life and what are the key issues? For example, it's very good to identify what are key concerns in that community. Is it, for example, kids dropping out of school, or is it a security situation, or is it, young people being involved in drugs? Is it, for example, a lot of teenagers getting pregnant, etc., etc. So there are many challenges in your community, and if you will find a link between your library program and solving these challenges, it will give you a very strong arguments when you speak, especially to external audience like your partners, like politicians, decision makers in general, some sponsors, and journalists as well, because all these audience, they are not so much interested in library as such, but they're interested in the benefit of the community. And lastly, situation and needs of your specific target group. So we really recommend to target every service to a specific target group, because it's really hard to serve the general population. We do have some services that are for everybody. But if we do some specific activity or specific program or project, we need to focus on specific target. And in our story, we have to reflect it. You can talk about situation where kids drop out of school, but then what is the specific audience? So you probably have a program that is focusing on children from 8 to 12 years old, because you have this evidence that this is the target group that suffers most from dropping out from school. Where can you get data to back up your story, specifically community data? First of all, in such an official sources like census and official sources of your local government. Usually you can find all statistical information, demographics, social economic level, maybe level of literacy is important, maybe access to education is important as well. There are a lot of NGOs that also collect data specifically in the area where you work. So for example, if you want to work with disabled people, you may want to find some organization that deals with disabled people, and they will know statistics, they will know how many of these people are around you in your community. Also, you may struggle finding data for some specific topic, and then you may have to do a survey or focus group or interview yourself. And don't be afraid to do that, because it's not academic research that we are talking about. You are not professionals of social research, of academic research, and you just can do a simple interview where you just ask a few questions of some selected members of these target groups to find out how they feel, how they would accept if library would do one or another project or program. And you can quote later in the story information that you received from them. And you also can use in stories less formal sources of information. For example, newsletters or even newspapers. Again, as I said, storytelling does not need to be academic and scientific. Then we go to a question what? As I said, it's an easier question usually to respond because this is where we tell what and how much did we do. Both elements are quite important because sometimes we say what we did, but we don't mention how much. So for example, if you did trainings, it's quite different to just mention one training or say that it was a program that actually lasted for 10 months and you ran 25 training sessions. That gives you, stronger impression to your audience. Who was involved and how? This is also where you should speak about partnerships. So for many specific projects or programs, libraries bring in partners, and this is the place where you can mention contribution by these partners and what was the role in your project or program. And lastly, but very important, who, how, and how many you have served. So don't forget data about participants, how many people you managed to reach and how they were engaged into the activity, program, or project. Sometimes, and it's a very typical question, libraries tend to put this information as so what, but we will see that it's a little bit different. Where we can get this data? Libraries are really good in collecting statistics. So usually first source of information for this kind of information, part is library statistics. And also if activity is a part of a certain project, most likely you will find this information in project reports or reports of your partner organization. If, for example, you're working with an NGO and they will be responsible for a training program, so of course they will be recording how many training sessions did they run and how many participants attended these sessions. So you can easily get this information afterwards. And here comes maybe the most difficult part, the tricky question, so what, which looks at impact. And what do we want to tell them? We want to tell what was the effect of your service, activity, or program on the community and on the specific target group that you are aiming to reach. What has changed? In other words, what was the outcome of your activity? What has changed in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of behavior, attitude, and quality of life of these people? So I know that this is the area that is really new and difficult for libraries to reflect on. So I will speak a little bit more just in a second. Where you can get this data? One of the best and maybe most useful ways is just to do a short survey where you not so much ask your participants, did they enjoy the activity, which is also a good question, but you also ask, so what changed as a result? Did they start saving money because of what they learned in the library? For example, a financial literacy program that taught them how to manage their finances. You can ask afterwards, did something change in your daily life? Are you applying what you've learned in the library, and how is it affecting? Maybe you are saving time, maybe you are saving money, maybe you got new opportunities to sell your small products, and so on and so forth. So just as quite simple surveys. Tests and measurements. This is less applicable and maybe a little bit more difficult to perform. And this is mainly for training programs to show that the knowledge and skills level of person increased. So this is applicable in a case when you can test actually people's knowledge and skills before the program and after the program. Interviews and focus groups, and the next one, which is basically the same, so it's user stories and testimonials. It's also a good way. It's just a matter of what question we will give. Again, if we, after the activity, we ask user, did you like it? Oh yeah, it was a great exhibition, or it was a great session. You'll get certain information, but don't forget to ask also, what has changed for you in a result of this activity, which we sometimes forget. Photos and videos is also a good source of information, and we can record these interviews and we can successfully use them in storytelling and in our communication. And partner reports as well, because sometimes us libraries are not very experienced in this area, but for example, NGOs, they have more experience in outcome evaluation. And sometimes they already have quite good knowledge how to run these impact surveys. And they may be collecting this data for themselves in case that if they were your partners, and they may share with you this information. So I promised to you that we will come back to outcomes, and I want to spend just a few minutes digging a little bit deeper because I really know that it's a new and hard area. Let's try to demystify what these outcomes are. As I said, an outcome is a specific benefit that results from library program or project or service, which was designed to help patrons to change their knowledge, skills, attitudes, behavior, awareness. Outcomes are generally expressed as changes that individuals perceive in themselves. What I want to say about that, and this is actually a question that I received a few days ago in another webinar that was for Indian librarians. They said, so how can I measure outcomes, but beyond these testimonials, what is the formal way to measure outcomes? There is no formal way. If you ask person if they are saving money, if the person said yes, that's your proof. That's enough. That means that it's a change that individual perceives in themselves. So if they feel more empowered, if they feel more confident about something, if they feel that their life has changed as a result of your service or program, it's totally enough for us as librarians to report. You don't need a very sophisticated impact evaluations with control groups to show that you've made a change. Outcomes can also be quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative is maybe something that we are more used to. So it's numbers and percentages, what good things happened to these people, how their income improved, how much did they learn, but it also can be qualitative. For example, people, as a result of your program, people may be more tolerant. People may be more active in civic life of your community. Also, you probably for the first time reach out to a specific target group, which you never attended before. So for example, homeless people, or you started to work with immigrant communities, or so on and so forth. That's also your outcomes. And in terms of process, these outcomes are developed through your activities and your resources. So we have resources that we use, staff, money, time. Also, we could talk more, say building, furniture, and so on and so forth. And this is what you use to generate certain activities. And as an output, as a first result, you have a new service or new program. And this program is what delivers outcomes, and outcomes is here the fact that this program or project courses in a short or medium term, and in the long term it becomes an impact. Why I don't emphasize so much impact? Because it's a really difficult term. It's something that takes time. Impact takes time, so it's hard to measure. So this is why we stick to outcomes. How does the change occur? So in this diagram, you can see time, and you can see the more time, the bigger the impact. And everything usually starts with knowledge. So knowledge is the easiest thing to change. You've organized just one short session and people left the room and they know more. about something that you told them. It takes a little bit more time to improve people's skills. You may not, it may not be enough to have just one session. You may need to have the whole training program to improve someone's skills. And usually when we have knowledge and we have skills, we start to change an attitude. So for example, if I want to improve family's diet, I need to know what is the good way of eating, and I need to have skills. I need to have recipes. I need to know what ingredients should I buy and should I use to cook healthy meal. And then I start to change my attitude. And as a result, I'm starting to change my behavior. So maybe my family used to order pizzas 3 times a week, but now I know how to cook healthy food, and I have skills, I have recipes, my attitude has changed, and I start to prepare more healthy meals to my family. And at the very end, it leads to an impact. Maybe 3 years from that moment, the family's health will be better because I made this change. Let's look at library examples. So for example, library ICT literacy program. The same diagram. Just after one short session, person can leave the room and say, oh, I know more about computer. I really had no idea what is it about, and I know something now. After several sessions, a person may say, I learned how to use it. Now I know how to use a computer. In some time after he or she knows more and has more skills to use computer, he or she may say, wow, now I understand that computer is useful to me. So her or his attitude has changed towards the computer. And next can be a behavior change. So now I use computer every day. It's because I know I have skills, I change my attitude towards computer, and now I use it every day. And what outcome or what impact it will give in a long time? It's very likely that this person after some time can say, you know, now when I fully embraced computer in my daily life, I feel more connected, I feel more empowered, I can connect to my family, I can pay my taxes, I feel more independent. This is the kind of impact we can reach. And such outcomes can be reached for any activity or service or program that library does. For example, another example, this is an outcome related to early childhood literacy program. And this is the feedback that parents gave after the session. So things like, I learned something new to share with my children. I increased my confidence how to help children learn. I'm spending more time with my children, more quality time, singing, dancing, reading. I increased awareness about library services and resources which can be used for small kids. So these are the kind of outcomes that they felt they received from the library's early literacy program. And the good news is that there are projects already, so we don't need to invent all of that. We don't need to spend hours and days thinking about it. There are projects already who analyzed the huge number of library programs and came up with a list of potential outcomes that libraries can give. So they have outcomes for civic engagement, digital learning, economic development, lifelong learning, job skills, summer reading, etc. So if your library is engaged in one of these areas, you have a program, you have an activity from one of these areas, you may want to just go online and look what outcomes have been defined for this area. And you may start measuring these outcomes in your community with your target group to see if your library is also contributing to the same outcomes. So I will leave you, and you can see in the screen the link. This is a big program run by American Library Association. And they came up with list of outcomes, list of indicators for every of these outcomes, and also specific tools. So questionnaires that you can use to survey your population. I will stop talking about theory now, and we will try to cook one story using these elements and using these instructions that I gave. So this is a real project. It's being implemented. It has been implemented in Ghana. It was funded by the NGO that I work for, IFL. And why this project was implemented. So the situation is that ICT is a compulsory subject in Ghana, and every child, every school child at certain age has to pass this exam. However, the real situation is that in rural areas, most of schools don't even have electricity, not mentioning internet connectivity and computers. So kids are not able to practice, and you can imagine they come to the exam and they have to pass ICT exam, but they have never touched a computer in their lives. So the situation when we started was that only 45% of children were passing ICT exam and could progress to secondary education, and the rest were getting behind. So this is why we started this project. And you can see some data about the community in the story. What we did, so we used mobile libraries and equipped them with ICT. And these mobile libraries started to travel to poor and rural schools and offer practical ICT classes for children. And during 5 years, the project taught 12,000 children of different grades, very close to the exam, at 20 schools in 4 regions to use computers and internet. And so what? So what was the result and what was the outcome of this project? The project helped over 700 grade 3 students to pass ICT exam. And probably what we are the most proud of is that ICT exam rate just in 1 year increased in 20%. So from 45% that you had in the beginning, just in 1 year, it was already 60%, 65%. And here I want to also give you a few more tips of what else you could integrate in the story. And we will use the same story for reference, so Ghana ICT classes story. Though I am emphasizing again and again, please use data, back up your story with data, but use few key numbers. So for example, I provided you a story which had a lot of data. And probably by the end of what I was speaking about, you already forgot. So what was the percentage, how many kids attended? So just pick few really key numbers that represent your program or service. If you can, for especially longer time activities, show tendency over time. That's even more powerful than just giving a number. So as you can see, this project was a long project. It lasted 5 years, and it started in 2015 with 45% pass rate of ICT exam, and it ended in 2019 with 84% pass rate. So, and you can see the increase. Don't forget visuals. They are very, very important in storytelling, and use good visuals, not dark photos where you see some general audience, some people, and you are not sure what's going on. You can see a photo from this Ghana project, and what do you think about this child? How does he feel? He's excited. You can see smiling child. You can see another child in front of the computer, and he's really excited. He's so surprised and so focused. So this is the kind of visuals that you should look for. And also quotes can help a lot, but make stories more personal. So for example, I invite you to meet Anna. Anna is 17 years old, and he was the one of participants who benefited from Ghana project. And what she's saying is that this library project helped her to pass her ICT exam and also helped her with English, because the computers that were traveling to schools also were loaded with a lot of material for reading. And she is now in a secondary school, and she is well in the way of reaching her dream, which is to become a policewoman. So these kind of short, very little stories, personal stories, are also quite useful and quite strong. I also want to encourage you not to start from scratch. Sometimes it's better to look for good examples outside, and there are a lot of resources where you can start. Christine showed Library Map of the World, which is a great source. Another source of information could be our program, so IFL Public Library Innovation Program. You can see the link on the slide, and we have more than 50 of these stories from different areas of library activity: agriculture, digital inclusion, education, employment, health, and so on. So just go online and check these stories out and see how you could use these as examples when you have to write your own story. So I want to stop here. I also want to see what's going on in the chat because I could not see it as I was presenting. And I want to open floor for questions.
So we actually have a couple of questions in the chat, and
maybe you can help me to spot
yes,
them.
I will just. You covered some of it in your end of your presentation, but I think it was a very good question. Someone commented that it's easy to overwhelm your story with statistics and data. And what would be your suggestion to how to choose the right data and use just enough? I think you talked a little bit about it, but if you have anything else to share.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, selecting data is another step, and sometimes librarians collect a lot of information, especially for library statistics. And if we want to integrate all this information, people really will get confused at the end. So yeah, the advice would be to pick key numbers and also to pick the numbers that best represent a certain activity or certain program that you are doing. Because you don't need to report all the data. You don't need to report book loans, for example, if the activity is not related at all with books.
And I want to add to this that that how much data you will want to use in your story or report. It will depend to who you are actually telling it. So to your library director or someone from the library field, you can include more data because they would be interested in more detail. But when it comes to stakeholders, really just pick one most powerful figure and fact and just use that. So, but when it comes to those three parts of the stories, we still feel like we need to have some data in each of those parts
exactly.
to understand more about the community and the problem. And one thing is that you will connect that problem again with your impact data or outcomes data at the end to show it will be the same number maybe, but we want to see it connected and to see that the difference that has been made.
I can see, Christine, we have a question about developing infographics as part of stories. Do you have any good tip for that? Have you came up with any good resource which would allow to come up with good infographics?
Yes, actually, I can share that I use myself a lot. I use a lot something that is called Canva, and many of you might be familiar with that resource. For free. You will find plenty of ready-made templates, which you can just copy, paste, and insert your data and use it. It really is powerful. Easy to use, intuitive, very simple, and a lot of resource. I'll post the link in the chat for this one as well.
Great, thank you. I can see Anka's question about imagining just a solo librarian in rural community, which I think is quite common situation in most of European countries. So what data would be crucial and easy to manage and use in this case? I would say that if a person is in charge of everything and cannot dedicate a lot of time, key data he or she should look in other institutions. Most likely in your about community, it would be a local government that would collect key information about statistical information about local community. What I would suggest this person to do is to at least do a few interviews, at least do a short survey of people who participated in a program or project or activity, and ask just few simple questions. So what was the benefit of this program for you personally? Did something change in your life, and did you feel something positive changed as a result of the program? This is something that we really can do easily. And even if we are not able to get to a big number, so we are not able to survey hundreds of people, we can have a quote which would say that, you know, a senior person who, it's good to know also a name, person's age, gender. So he or she attended this program and this is the benefit that this person received. These user testimonials are very, very good example as well.
And I also want to add that those user testimonials, this is something that you can collect even if you had your program 2 years ago. And let's say the time has come and you want to tell a story about it, but you realize you don't have anything to demonstrate the impact. You can still contact your community members who participated and ask them about their experience and how it helped them during the time after the program.
I can see that the time is running as always, and we really want to use an opportunity to do something practical. I think that if, I don't know what Anka and Claudia will say, but probably we are saying goodbye to our Facebook viewers and we'll just stay with this audience. And what we want to do next is we want to look at few stories that were submitted to the organizers of Occupy Library Innovators Hub project. So these are actual stories submitted by you. Maybe some of you are in the room, the ones who submitted stories, I'm not sure. So we had access to that and we just picked few stories. We actually picked 3 stories with Christine, and we want to look at these stories and give you some tips. And also we want to ask you to comment on these stories and tell us what you think is missing and how the story should be improved. So I will share again my screen because I have a summary of these stories in my presentation. And we'll go straight to the first one. So the first story that we picked is a story about service called Women Can Succeed from Home. And it came from Moldova. Their response to the question why was that COVID-19 had particularly negative effect of women, and many of them lost jobs and had to stay even more at home with children. And that created a lot of psychological negative effects and made them confused. So what library did was to partner with an NGO and to carry out an awareness campaign to address these issues. And library organized meetings, exhibitions, discussions that showcased women's roles in the society and also taught them to use new media to improve their image and even to earn some income. And so what? They mentioned that they reached over 45 women who participated in the project and learned about importance of women in decision making. And they put one quote of participant who said, each of us can consider ourselves as successful women, depending on how we perceive concept of success. So this is the first story we chose. And we want to invite you with all this new knowledge you got today. How do you see the story? Do you have any advice on what could be missing in the story?
So while we are waiting your own ideas, and we really do, so test us, we looked at the stories and I'd like to provide what I think. So when I read that story, I see that the problem is really relevant. So that is something that people can feel, let's say. But when I look at the problem is I have a question, what is the scale of problem? So I understand it happens in Moldova, is it?
Yes, it's Moldova story.
It is in Moldova, but from that description in the first part about the why, I'm missing information about the particular. Is it about the Moldova as the whole? Is it about a specific county, or it's just one city? So that'd be something that I would also include in there. I like how the problem was formulated. However, the statement about it that the women are becoming more psychologically affected and confused. It's a very strong statement for me, and I feel like I need the source. Is it a research? Where does it come from, or is it your own judgment? So, and if it is a study, so what's the scale? What's the percentage of women in that community or the target group who are affected with this problem? Well, the next thing is something that is actually over all three stories, but while we are looking just at this one, so you see that when we are talking about so what, they mention 45 women participated, and this is a common mistake all over the world when we put under impact something that is actually not outcomes data, it is performance. It is a statistic that explains what you did. You engaged 45 women in the project activities. So what would be what has changed for those 45 women after they participated here? Okay, and I can see what the background of this common mistake is. That if we look at the words outcomes and outputs in many languages, it is one word. There is no separate word in our native languages. Like, for example, I'm Latvian. In Latvian, there is no difference. If it's output or outcome, we use one word. And that's what can be one reason where it originates. The good thing about this is I really like the human voice in it. I liked reading the testimonial that was included, and there is more in the handout if you see that. But what I really miss is to have a little bit more data in the why, and see if we can include, in addition to testimonials, also something in so what, because we say that these women learned, but did we really measure it, or it's just our own assumption that they learned? So that'd be something. And one last thing that I want to mention is that that it also highlights a lot of SDGs. And in this case, from the story text, I cannot find relevance to all of them. And my recommendation would be, if you want to write a story that's relevant to SDGs, is better to put less. Of course, there are things included in all of them, but when I read this story, for me, it's more about SDG number 4 and 5, which is about women, empowerment of women, and providing training and lifelong learning opportunities. But it's very hard for me to see how this is relevant to the SDG number 1 or the SDG number 2, which is about fighting hunger, food security, and sustainable agriculture. That's from my side. Do we have any comments in the chat?
Yeah, I am also curious to hear what you think. What in your view is missing in the story?
And if someone feels like that, you can just speak up at this point, right?
Well, from the positive elements that I also want to highlight is that library mentioned partnering with an NGO. And this is a very good way of making story more credible, because probably someone would say, so what library can do to empower women? They are not experts. They probably don't know much about it. So this is the one good example where you mentioned organizations who is, even by the name, you can understand Profemenia. So it's something related with women empowerment. So it automatically gives you credibility. So you mentioned that you work with this reliable partner who is involved into this area and was your partner leading all these campaigns and probably doing some training and so on.
So overall, I think this is a great story already. It has important information. It's just that by adding some data, not a lot, you can make it even better. So.
Okay, we can move to another.
Ugna, one question from me, because I want to take advantage of you guys till the end.
Go ahead.
Probably when we have this kind of a program, probably this program ended very, it's very fresh. And maybe this is one of the reasons why the so what part is not very clear. And my experience with librarians is that not only that they are shy to share and open their mics in webinars, but they are also shy when it comes to considering to defining success of a program.
Mm.
I mean, I remember in ancient times, I was in this webinar with, not webinar, there were face-to-face meetings then with Tord Hoivik from Statistics in IFLA. And he was trying to convince a bunch of very experienced librarians that for some programs, it makes sense to have very in-depth, very scientific, very, data, very organized data. But for some other purposes, for a program like this one, just to have the perceived benefit coming from the beneficiary, it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need more. I mean, exactly the thing that the people that were in the room were, if you capture their benefit directly, it's enough. It's a proof that's very powerful. Yes, if you can also demonstrate scientific progress in time in 5 years and how that thing changed their life, that's completely, it's a miracle. But the thing that happens just after them and the opinion of the participant is valid and is very powerful to present. So, and you don't have to do anything else than just ask.
I totally agree, Anka. I totally agree. We really, most of cases, it's impossible for us to do very sophisticated research. So I totally agree. And even this example, it already has testimonial. So one of participants said, each of us can consider ourselves as successful women. What I would have done is I would have added, do you feel more successful after you attended this? Yourself, do you feel more successful after you attended this training?
And then something like 70% of participants said that they feel more successful after this training.
You know,
Yes.
if you only had maybe 45 women, it's not that hard to actually even put something in the back of the room and put a red stickers if they feel more successful, and the white ones if nothing has changed, and come up with the 70%. So sometimes we can be quite creative and we can come up with these numbers as well. But if you don't feel confident of doing a survey and asking to come up with percentages, it's totally fine to get a testimonial and someone saying, the important thing is that how you form your question. You really should be asking about the effect of library service. Not only did you like the activity, which is quite common mistake that librarians do. Like, what was the result? How do you feel? Do you feel better? Does your knowledge change? Do you have different attitudes after you attended this program?
Yeah,
Okay, so let's move to another story, because we have few of them. So we have another one that is from Romania, Proactive EU. A great story again. Why? And I am sorry, but I need to be moving all the time chat and other window. So the why service was started is because citizens were not fully aware of the power as active citizens to change society and future of their communities. Now it does not want to come. Yeah. They built a network of 30 public librarians who learned how to encourage citizens to be involved and how to deliver quality information about EU. And this is what they provided as So What. So they did 3 workshops with 30 librarians and 30 workshops with citizens, 300 citizens. And although they don't have clear evidence, they believe that it affected positively the turnout for voting in 2019 for European Parliament members. So this is another story, and I would encourage you to write a comment or speak, just open your mic and speak. What is missing in this story?
Hi, I'm Olympia. I'm from Romania and I know this project.
Oh, great, great.
Yes. After this webinar, I reformulated all we read, we write there. Because why, of the question why we don't have data, any data. The project was implemented in Gorj County, and at least Gorj County we can tell there. And we possibly use the statistics from former election, but we don't. And to the question what, it is data there, but we do commonly mistake and put all the data to the question so what. Probably the this passage, although we don't not have clear evidence, because we don't have clear evidence. We can measure before and after the election, but we believe this because in our county, the number of citizens who vote in 2019 was bigger than 2040. And but because I have a, I don't know how I tell this. I like data, and I don't want to write the mistake. I don't want to, because I don't like. And after that, I understand much more about how our project was will be better present. We make a story much better after this webinar, I hope.
Well, thanks a lot for speaking up. It's really great that you are in the room and that you could comment on the story. Christine, do you have any comment?
Yes, I'm really happy about your feedback and that you are here, is because, well, you said exactly what I wanted to say, and it also shows to me and I think to Ugne that we did something good with this presentation, because you got what we wanted to say. In addition to that, I want to say that this particular project, I am personally very interested for the library map of the world project, and it's because we don't have many stories for SDG number 16, which this is mostly about. And to comment on SDGs is to say that SDG number 11 would be something that I would just remove from here, is because 11 is more about urbanization, transport systems, access to basic services. There is cultural and natural heritage inside, but it's more about preserving it and things like that. But it's a perfect example of what libraries can do for civic engagement, and there are not many projects like that. So I think you're doing a great job, and there are no mistakes, there is just doing.
Thank you.
Also, I want to add from my side that don't worry looking for proof that everything was a result of library activity. It's always not a total true, because it's always other factors that affect. So probably the fact that, voting increased, the people were more active. Of course, some other factors also may have contributed to it, but we don't need to go too deep into that. We did some activity, and it was quite a big activity because we can see quite a big number of people. So if you have told me that you've only reached 30 people, I probably did not believe that voting increased because of that. But you reached 300 citizens, and they also have their families, their relatives, so a bigger social network. So I would really say, that you can claim quite strongly that it was an effect of your work.
And then the language comes. I mean, the so what can be, we contributed to some
Exactly.
result that shows, because of course there's many, and this is one of the places where all libraries are so careful not to brag about things that it's not very clear that they produce. And usually impact is not one factor that produces impact, it's many factors, so it's very difficult to to claim in by yourself and prove like that every cent and every number there is because of a program in the library. But as long as you are showing data that are in relations, but also be careful on how to do the language and say that you contributed, or you this kind of language that protects you from bragging. Yes. So I will just put the feedback here in chat, and we are going to stay as long as Ugne and Christina are up to it. But I just want you guys to know that we are also collecting data so that we can do better. And yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I also was looking at time, and I realized that it's already 4:30 in Romania. So we just have one more story, and maybe we will show shortly. Also, because Ukraine is also part of this project, so we don't want to miss a story from Ukraine. And it's a really interesting story about library activity, physical activity, medicine for health. And why this project was started is because it was necessary to solve a problem of rehabilitation of the older community. We can see what. So elderly people received Nordic walking sticks to walk and recuperate. And we have information why and how these Nordic walking sticks are beneficial to people's health. And in the so what, we do have a list of results. So 38 participants from certain ages were engaged, and they did much more than just walking. They also did breathing exercises. They disseminated relevant information and promoted health style, and they gave support materials to these people. So what do you think about this story, Christine and everyone else in the room?
Well, while people are preparing to open their cameras and mics, I will just quickly say, I like the story. The good thing about this, I like that it's very focused, because the author just showed that it's related to one SDG. It is health and well-being. And something why it is relevant, it actually, I looked into the targets of this story, and it talks about reducing mortality rates from diseases through prevention and promoting well-being and health, but specifically talks about the cardiovascular diseases and other diseases that actually Nordic walking is very helpful for prevention. So it is very relevant from that point of view. But when I read the story again, and I think the author would, after this workshop, tell the same, is that I lack a little bit information about the scale, where it takes place, what is the community, there is a problem of rehabilitation of the elderly community, but what does it mean? How big is a group? What are the things they can't do, or are there any options for them? Maybe this is a community where the library is doing this very interesting activity, something that I want to also learn, because it's not a regular library service, right? And again, the so what it contains everything that I would move to just describe what was done, how many participated, what is the age of the target group, and what were the activities. This is all about so what. And yeah,
Well, just to add again, so what, we could really strengthen this element of the story, telling more what was the benefits that these elderly people received. So it could be done through just testimonials, asking how do they feel after participating in these walks. Do they feel even more connected to their community? Because it's not only about physical activity, but it's also about getting more connected to others, right? So it's about social communication as well. Another very good strategy, in my view, could be talking to some medical people. So a doctor or a nurse in the community who would say, whoa, this is a great project. Finally, library is helping us with these elderly people who are facing so much problems, and they will definitely get benefits out of this activity. So again, coming back to not only you are part of stories, not only your target group, but you can also involve some experts that would say, it's a really beneficial activity. Also, in case of, for example, working with children, it's very useful to talk to their parents or to their teachers and say, so do you see any benefits of this activity on the children? So this would be another example.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should not be keeping people for much longer. Christine, what do you think?
Yes, I agree.
So
And
maybe
we'll move to our last slide. And well, we want to say thank you for joining us today and connecting. We really enjoyed having you here, and we always are happy to talk about storytelling. I'm also among one of those who love data and things. But we hope that if you took just one thing out of this, so that we have been successful. So now it's really your time to go back and think about your own story, and you have many examples of projects and activities that you are doing in your library, and just I encourage you to try and just really sit down and think in a focused way about the project. You can tell a story, think about who is the audience, to whom you want to tell, reflect about their goals, what they care about, and then try really in real life to see if you can acquire some data for describing the community, the problem, and the target group. See what library statistics you are collecting that you can use for that, and yeah, don't reinvent the wheel with outcome evaluation. As Ugne mentioned, there are plenty of resources online. We are all doing similar things, and just try and Google and see if you can find and locate the questionnaire. Use some of those resources that we shared, for example, the project outcome, to come up with good questions that you can ask to really get that information about what has changed for those people who you are helping through your library programs. So that's
I also want to leave you with this positive message. Positive message is one of the most important elements of the storytelling. Confidence and trust in what you're doing. We, Christine and I, have spent all our career working with libraries, and we know how great libraries are. And you also know how great your libraries are. We just need to prove it to the outside world. So good luck with this work. Good luck with your library advocacy. And thanks a lot, Progress Foundation, for having me here, and also for giving me a chance to reconnect with Christine, with whom we worked many times together in past.